Hello everybody, I am Rue and this is my cozy corner of BookTube, Rue with the Books. I hope that you're all doing well today, that you're enjoying whatever book you are currently reading and that you're also smashing out your reading goals for the year. I'm currently working a whole week straight and then going away for a couple of days, so I don't have that much time this week for a video. So this review for Salem's Lot by Stephen King will be a little bit shorter than usual and a little bit less structured, so maybe a bit more stream of consciousness flowy. We'll see how it goes. If you like Stephen King, be sure to press the like button so I know that I should make more Stephen King book reviews. And if you like books, BookTube and BookTube content, be sure to press the subscribe button down below for weekly uploads from the Rue with the Books channel. Grab a beverage, get comfy, and let's talk about Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot is Stephen King's take on a vampire novel, taking heavy inspiration from Bram Stoker's Dracula. While Dracula is rich in atmosphere, I found it to be quite a boring and dull novel that is simply way longer than it should be. Salem's Lot shares the fact that it's probably longer than it should be, but at least I can say that it is far from being boring. It's set in the small town of Jerusalem's Lot, and Stephen King takes a long time to build up a picture of what living in this town is like. By the end of the novel, it feels like you know the town like the back of your hand. I think that this is a strength, but also a weakness of this book. It felt like it took me quite a while to get into this book because Stephen King wasn't doing very much to progress the plot, instead taking time to, as I said, kind of build up what this town is like. And so, yeah, it doesn't really progress the plot, at least from our main character's POV, because he was off describing other various characters and places that I didn't feel particularly invested in, and what their shops are particularly like. I think it took me about a quarter or a third of the book to start feeling like I was actually invested in the book. I think this could have been improved on by introducing the big bad a little bit earlier and showing us that kind of behind the facade of the town there is a dark and evil shadow lurking. So just to bring things forward a little bit and start the kind of tension and danger and mystique just a little bit earlier, just little teasers here and there to kind of set the scene and start kind of getting that train going. While I just moaned about the sloppy pacing for the start of the book, when stuff does get real, it absolutely hits the fan. When stuff starts going down in this book, I felt genuinely scared for everybody in the town. The tension and stakes, pun intended, felt astronomically high in this book. What Stephen King does brilliantly in this book is that you don't really know who is going to be safe. It follows several POVs and they're definitely all in danger and can drop off at any point. I feel like what is really good about this book too is the kind of amount of chaos that ensues is just right. Because it does get absolutely crazy and chaotic, and this vampire threat does feel very real, and kind of defeating it is this almost insurmountable challenge. I'm very much a character-focused reader, and I really enjoyed reading the character interactions in this book. The main characters in this book are Ben Mears, first of all, an author who has returned to Salem's Lot to face his past, and I do find it very funny that the kind of amount of books in which Stephen King has a writer as the central protagonist. Going forward, then we have Susie or Susan Norton, who is Ben's love interest in the book. Then we have Father Callahan, a priest whose faith is tested in this book. And while I kind of enjoyed his character, I would have liked a bit more focus. He's written in the blurb to be a very kind of important character, but we don't really see much of Father Callahan until about maybe 60 or 70% of the book. And even then, I feel like the amount of page time that Father Callahan gets is very short. And to mark the final character, we have Mark Petrie, an 11-year-old boy who has watched way too many scary movies and is now the town's best defense against this vampire threat. I just talked about the characters as they are written on the blurb, but the book heavily focuses on Ben and Susan for most of the book. If you hadn't read the blurb prior to starting reading the book, you probably wouldn't even know that Father Callahan and Mark Petrie are also main characters. They only start being relevant fairly far into the book. I will just quickly give an aside that Mark does have a little short chapter, maybe about 10-15 minutes, kind of early on in the book. Then he's set aside for a long time to develop these other characters and kind of see what they're going through and how they're dealing with this challenge and obstacle that they have to overcome. So we get a little Mark chapter, and then he's set aside until he's actually necessary for the plot further on. I think Stephen King is pretty good at writing characters, and this book is no exception. I love when he gives children a prominent role in his books because I feel like children are typically used as a kind of device in books that they don't know what they're talking about, or they do know what they're talking about, but the adults are ignoring them because they're children. Who the hell cares what they think and what they're probably making stuff up. So I like that Stephen King doesn't really do this, and instead he actually makes the children serious characters in the books, and they can sometimes be trusted, and sometimes their advice is very much taken on board. So anyway, as kind of said, I like that Stephen King gives his children a prominent role because children can be quite helpless in the real world. They're still learning about the about the world, and they have this kind of innocence and naivety with them, making them easy targets for these scary monsters in books. However, Stephen King does have this ability to make children very interesting characters that can have an actually important role in the story. Mark is genuinely quite good as a character in this book. And as I mentioned, he watches a lot of scary movies, so he knows about vampires and their weaknesses, but he's also a bookworm who does learn things from these kind of non-fiction books that he reads. And he can use the knowledge he's learned in books to actually get out of sticky situations. I enjoyed him having a more active role in the story, and it's good that, kids can have a moment to shine in these horror books by Stephen King. The villain in this book is pretty terrifying. His evil hand plays a massive role in the stuff that goes down in this town, and how it goes completely out of control. I don't want to spoil the book, so I'll leave it there, but genuinely, when I think back on this book, I'll be remembering a very scary vampire that has left a massive impression upon me. Not a bite on the neck, I hope. So let's do a little cheeky conclusion. So, to conclude, the beginning of the story for me was by far the weakest section that needed a little bit of spice just to make it more interesting. Stephen King spends way too much time describing the town and its citizens without really progressing the plot, and while I am a character-focused reader, I just didn't find myself caring that much about a lot of these characters. The character work in this book is excellent, at least for the main cast, and I think it's one of the best aspects of this book. I feel like I always talk about Stephen King's characters and how much I enjoy reading about them, and it's certainly an aspect that makes me want to continue reading his works. The story gets very chaotic and very dark, and it really spirals out of control. And I like a little bit of chaos in my horror book, so that was a very positive thing for me. The vampires were actually scary, and they felt like an absolutely humongous threat in this book, and something not to be taken lightly. It took what was good about Dracula and just ramped it up by about 500%, to a point where it felt like the characters were actually in a lot of trouble, while keeping the same kind of rules that Bram Stoker's Dracula has established, and maybe taking some creative liberties here and there. The story gets very tense and very high octane, and by some points I felt very immersed in this book, as well as the characters, if they'll make it through, and how this whole story will conclude. The ending is pretty good, and it felt very bittersweet for me. I enjoyed it a lot. It also kind of leaves a lot of space for developing the lore and having Salem Slot be this kind of cursed, unfriendly, unforgiving place that I'm sure will play some kind of role in the Dark Tower franchise. So, overall, I rated this book 3.5 stars out of 5. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have made it this far, then I hope no vampire tries to suck your blood today. If you haven't already, press the like button to help with the algo and subscribe for more of my content. If you would like to connect with me outside of YouTube, I have links to my Goodreads, my TikTok, my Instagram, and my Storygraph in the description below. Anyway, until next time, Root out.